Good afternoon, everyone. I see some familiar faces out there. For those that don't know, you know myself. My name is Mark Smith. I'm on the board of the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance, and I'm also the current executive director of the Pacific Seaweed Growers Association. So, hence my connectivity to this session here today. Working under the assumption the majority of you were on the great session that these folks were on before. I'll just take 30 seconds and recap. We've got Jennifer Woodland, who's the CEO of Nuchella Seafood, as well as the current chair of the Canadian Aquaculture Industry Alliance. We're thrilled to have Jennifer here. And Bill Collins, well, he's currently in Port Hardy, but from Sydney, BC, who is the chair of Cascadia Seaweed. So it sounds like we've got a pretty decent number of folks out there, so I suspect there's a fair number of questions to get to. So I would just ask, we've got about 16 or 17 people on this call, so I would kindly ask if you could just put your questions right into the Q&A and the chat box. I will take those questions in the order that they are received. So welcome, everybody. Actually, I just got an update that we now have 27 people, so that's a minute per question if everybody has a question, so that would be great. So without further ado, we've got some questions out there. We're happy to get the show underway. I think we've got some great knowledgeable people here who are ready and willing. So first question, I'm gonna defer this to Bill Collins on the panel from Richard Valera, who's curious to know how can one get into kelp farming?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So the first thing to do is contact the Pacific Seaweed Growers Association, who are going to be the main educators as we build out the sector. Secondly, I would say, obviously do the homework. We get calls quite regularly from folks that say, I want to do seaweed farming. And the first advice we give them is, read up on the sector. But from a coastal community's perspective, you have to be prepared to be in the communities across BC. You have to be prepared to be on the water, and you need to be prepared to go bigger than you might expect. There's the reason that seaweed cultivation has not really taken off is because it's been pursued by smaller operations, 1 or 2 hectare farmers, to deliver seaweed as a nice foodstuff for farmers markets. You have to go a little bit bigger. The efficiencies are in 10 plus hectares. So you have to be prepared to do a little bit bigger job than you may think in order to get the economies of scale to make it profitable.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Just looking out there for more questions.
Do you want me to share how we got involved?
Yeah, that would be great. And then we've got another question, but please, Jennifer, that would be great. Please.
Thank you. So with our shareholding nations, we had tenures. We had aquaculture tenures, and through their treaty, they had tenures on hold. And so we were looking for uses for those. They weren't conducive for shellfish farming. So I started doing some research on kelp. Everything I read on kelp got me more and more excited around plastic reduction as an alternative use of plastic, health, everything. And what we did is we then began to see, just because we had these tenures, could we even grow kelp? And so we had a grant that we applied for under the National Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada, got an NSERC grant to put test lines of kelp in, and we did that in cooperation with the North Island College. And we're able to then do some analysis on the kelp that we grew at the sites that we had, and realized, oh, we can grow kelp, we can grow really good kelp. And so that's how we really got into it, just by doing the homework. We had some of the capacity already, and we had the sites. So if you are looking to get a site, then you do need to contact the province of British Columbia, Flynn Row Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations, and begin discussions there. But if you already have that access, or you have a good relationship with the First Nations in the territory in which you want to operate, that's a good starting place.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. Just Bill, back to you for a second. This is a carry on from Richard's initial question, and which might also speak to the from the farming standpoint is there spots in the island that might be currently underserviced or present opportunity from a farming standpoint currently?
Yeah, pretty well anywhere on the island, save maybe around a little bit around Victoria and maybe the southern Gulf Islands. The idea for seaweed, of course, is to grow it in areas that are largely not inhabited by lots of motor vessel traffic or other big ticket items such as a large river or big outfalls such as they are up and down. So industrialized coastal zone you may want to avoid. But pretty well, most of the coast of Vancouver Island is available, and seaweed is a weed. It grows like a weed, and we have a lot of species. So there's tons of room for farms.
Great, thanks, Bill. And you seem to be a popular guy here, Bill. So this is from Carla Sorrell, and she's curious now about, Bill, you had spoken about products in the session, including chips and snacks. Do you believe there's potential for meat replacement items, and what is this, and maybe just what is the general scope of possibility for seaweed and foods in general?
Well, as a meat alternative, yeah, we've, as I mentioned, we've talked to folks like Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat who are sourcing many forms of protein, mostly terrestrial protein. They haven't really delved into seaweed yet as an ingredient. We know there's fish substitutes. A great resource is called the GFI, the Good Food Institute, which my business partner Mike Williamson will tell you is an excellent resource for all things meat substitute using protein. So there's going to be room for seaweed in that space. We're starting with our own branded product, because whole food is where we want to begin with, as opposed to becoming an ingredient. But by and large, there's so much scope to be learned and to be done in this in meat replacements, for example.
Great, thanks, Bill. Jennifer, I'm going to flip this one over to you. How do you? This is from Gerald Kaz. How do you envision the seaweed industry in 5 years? And the question is really from the perspective of both infrastructure, and the question is both locally and globally. Any sense of the size of the market?
Well, I mean, as I said in the presentation, I mean, every door we open opens new opportunities. And I think it would surprise a lot of people to realize how much kelp they use in their daily life, whether it's in nutraceuticals, cosmetics, but the emerging opportunities in so many food products, human food and pet food is enormous. So I think if done correctly, if the government puts the effort behind getting applications in and supporting the First Nations and companies like Cascadia who are partnering with First Nations to grow the business, you're going to see enormous growth with markets up and down the coast within the 5 years. And I think with regards to infrastructure, we're already seeing some of that. I know like Cascadia is investing into land base and investing into some of that product development. So I think that there's a long, really highly valued road that we're on right now already with investing in that innovation and technology. And 5 years from now, I think you're going to see pockets all up and down Vancouver Island investing into kelp, not just the aquaculture, but the product development, the packaging, the innovation. And you're seeing, I mean, Bill, maybe you want to talk about some of that, what's happening in Port Alberni and with the food hub and with your new land-based facility. Like, this has only been a couple of years of us working with Cascadia, and already we're seeing huge leaps forward in advancements in the sector.
Yeah, it is a community-driven sector, so we need all hands on deck to promote it as a part of a transition to a more blue economy, to move into blue economy, Jennifer, as you mentioned this morning. So that's a really key element, is to get everybody in lockstep. And whether it's in product development, we're going to need folks like North Island College to tell us, as the sector builds out, to tell us how to preserve seaweed, how to package seaweed, how to deliver it. I remember, Jennifer, you being from Newfoundland and a great affiliation with the Marine Institute. Even as late as the 90s and 2000s, we were developing new ways to package fish to preserve the quality and the texture and the taste so that it could be shipped longer distances. So this level of innovation is going to cost tens of millions of dollars in investment at all levels, and it's going to take all levels from municipal, provincial, and federal governments to support it.
Great, Bill. I'm just going to take this opportunity because the next question you actually just half answered, which is fantastic, and it was around how are issues being addressed, and the genesis of the question is really around is how important is science and technology with regards to seaweed opportunities?
Yeah, it works in lockstep, and you could compare it to the chicken and egg scenario, but in reality, it takes innovation, both commercial innovation, science innovation, and regulatory innovation to make it work. So everybody has to work together, and fear not, we have to take some risks. As I mentioned to someone the other day, we can change the world, but we have to start now. We can't wait to change the world.
Thank you. This is actually just, it seems there's been a few questions already around farming. This message just came in from Aaron Bremner Mitchell, who's on the line from Cascadia Seaweed. It appears as though Cascadia is going to be hosting a seaweed festival on the Saanich Peninsula next May, and they are working on coordinating a session for those who want to enter this growing sector. So put that in the back of your minds, and I guess a plug for the Seaweed Growers Association. We're seaweedgrowers.org. We'll certainly keep folks apprised of any events related like that coming up. So keep that in your calendar for the spring. Another question from Richard. Is it viable to farm kelp as a standalone product, or is it better combined with other aquaculture products? And I'm going to send that to Jennifer.
One of the wonderful things about kelp, and I think when you're mentioning growing it in conjunction with others, is that IMTA, that integrated multi-trophic aquaculture. And that is one of the marvelous things about kelp, is that it can be done in conjunction with shellfish farming. It can be done in conjunction with finfish farming. There's been quite a bit of science and trials that I'm aware of in the past 10, 15 years of growing kelp alongside of other aquaculture activities. And it's been done quite successfully. So I think that as we get better at understanding what's necessary for the type of kelp to grow to meet the markets for the products we want to produce, then we can get even more innovative and efficient. That's the word I'm looking for, because the efficiency is going to be, as you know, we're here now, we need food security, and we certainly need more healthy food, and that's going to come from the ocean, that we can get really efficient in how we grow our food by doing more than one species within the hectares that we have available to us in our tenures.
Great. And Jennifer, I think I'm going to keep you on the hot seat. There's a few questions here. They all hang together, so I'll give them to you one at a time. This is from Cheryl Northcott. Greetings from Tassus. So that's fantastic. Good to see you folks here. What is from a permitting standpoint, and you have spoken to this, but if you could maybe address that for me, they're the federal or provincial level requirements to get into the farming scenario.
So when you're looking for an aquaculture tenure, doing exclusively marine plants is a little bit different than traditional aquaculture, because it's fully managed in your tenure and your license by the province. Whereas if you were looking for a shellfish tenure or finfish tenure, you would have to get your license from the federal government through DFO. But you have to apply through the provincial government to get access to that tenure. As a part of that application, you provide them your plans. And what those plans look like include drawings of what you want the system to look like, what the infrastructure would look like above and below the water. And then that gets sent to Transport Canada, because you also need a navigable waters permit, because you are going to be works in the water. And then you will have requirements on how those would need to be sited. Do you need lights at the corners? What size buoys? What types of buoys, to make sure that you're not a navigation hazard. A part of that application includes consultation to First Nations in the territory in which you operate, to make sure that they are in agreement. And it also does go to DFO to ensure that you're not conducting that activity over any sensitive habitat or habitat of concern, to ensure that there's no interference with DFO activity as well. So it gets referred out to a number of agencies, but for kelp it is a streamlined in that it all goes in through the province, and the province then sends that referrals out for you.
Right. And maybe I'll put these all into one bucket, and I think some of them were addressed in the session, but maybe in a summary pieces. is funding available, technical advice, and before you jump in there, Jennifer, I think the technical and support, that seems to be a common theme in all these discussions. And again, I think it's really, as an emerging industry, we're all working together and trying to get collaborative to build out that technical advice and build out some support resources. So, I mean, I think my exposure into this industry is not just on a British Columbian, Canadian perspective, but on a global platform. The Seaweed crowd is a very collaborative group. So at the end of the day, there's folks out there, whether it's Bill or Jennifer or myself, to help you connect. It's just a matter of reaching out. And the last question was around foreign ownership, which I think, you know, that really kind of comes down to a traditional business structure. There's going to be a whole bunch of different cases, but I would also reference in there specifically for Cheryl is that a lot of the work that VIEA has been doing over the past few years is around that foreign trade zone. And the other side of that equation, of course, is foreign direct investment. So certainly open to either George Hansen or folks within here for further discussions around that. But I think that's, at the end of the day, that's really kind of a business question, a generic business question operationally. So thank you for those questions from Tassis. Moving on to Laurel from Gamble River. How, and I think maybe this might be a Jennifer question, and I guess we'll keep it in Campbell River, see if you're up there. How can complementary organizations, bracket the Campbell River Salmon Foundation, support seaweed initiatives?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, there's always room for collaboration and messaging. I think one of the things about kelp, and maybe it's just because I spend a lot of time researching it and I'm a biologist in my background. So, you know, I spend a lot of time in the ocean, but I'm always surprised what people don't realize about kelp and you know, what a benefit it is to the environment and how it sequesters carbon and its habitat and all the wonderful things that, you know, comes along with growing this weed. So maybe, you know, just through communications and collaborations on different activities, but being able to learn a lot about the industry. The Pacific Seaweed Growers Association is going to be really helpful in that, in putting out all that information where it's easily accessible about not just the nutritional benefits, the health benefits, the product development, but also just, it's one of the foods that we can grow that is actually not has any carbon impact. It actually takes carbon out of the ocean, which is really important right now when we look at ocean acidification. So it's actually a beneficial food to grow. And, you know, by collaborations with other organizations that we can talk about what each other is doing, we're going to raise the profile of that and really get the message out there that this is something we can do here and be proud of and really raise those markets.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. Also, Laurel also wanted to pass on her regards of thanks to both you, Jennifer, and Bill for your perspective and willingness to share all your experience. And Bill, I'm sorry if I cut you off. Please carry on.
That's okay. I heard a good one, which I think we should sing from the rooftops. The goal is to decarbonize the atmosphere and recarbonize the biosphere.
Great. There's another question. I think I'm going to give this to you, Bill. How does the industry currently distribute the products? Port, truck, air, or air?
Truck by and large, because these are tonnages we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so it goes to primary processing, which makes the seaweed shelf stable. And that can be utilized in the existing fish plant infrastructure, blast freezers, and cold storage, or newer systems such as being developed at North Island College around drying and delivering a dried product to market, which has a longer transport, easier to transport, of course, when you're not transporting water. But it's going to be very traditional routes to market, as in any, traditional aquaculture methods.
Great, thank you. Jennifer, I feel bad. I feel like I'm giving you the administrative questions. Not going to say the hard ones, but the administrative ones. This is from Doug Lang, and that last question came in from Dave Davina. Thank you. From Doug, is property taxation a major concern in this industry?
Property taxation is a concern for all of us. I mean, yes, you definitely need to pay your taxes and you have to pay annual fees on your tenures. I find them mostly reasonable, I will say, so far, if you're utilizing and you're getting full utilization of your site. But yeah, you do have to pay fees, and any expense is definitely a consideration, especially nowadays. But the fees that are required for your hectares in terms of your property tax, they're not overly onerous in this activity as compared to others.
Great, thank you. Back over to Bill. This is from Richard again regarding quote unquote, I thought I heard Bill speaking about organizing a buying cooperative for small independent kelp farmers. Is there a timeline for that?
Right, so that's the model that's being used on the East Coast in Maine, where folks will, independent farmers will organize buying from the 3 processors that exist in Maine. There's no timeline for that on this coast. As I mentioned, we're pushing more of an integrated supply chain model where the farmers that work an integrated approach with Cascadia will enter, they'll do the operations. We provide the seed, and then there's a long-term supply agreement. So it's like a barbell strategy where we're supporting up front. The operations move from the farmer, and then we support 2 things. We support, our goal is to be the highest value for producers, so that we're commanding the highest market rates in the North American and perhaps global market. And to do that, we have to be the keepers of the brand. So us and our First Nations partners love the oceans. So we wouldn't do anything that we felt was at all going to disrespect the ocean or to disrespect the brand, because it has to come from the clean, pristine waters of BC. So in the middle is place for the farmer. And for us, it would be difficult for us to manage 1,000 small scale farmers. It's going to be better for us to manage 100 larger scale farmers. So yes, the cooperative model will be a part of our future, but it's going to have to be done to a scale that makes sense. And what that scale is at the moment, is it 10 hectares per farmer? Is it 20? Is it 50? I can't answer that.
Great, thanks, Bill. I'm going to read the question, and then I suspect I might get an answer from both Jennifer and Bill on this. This is coming from Sydney. Sydney, I work with a First Nation working on growing our shellfish business. We are now producing clams, looking to expand to oysters and seaweed. Challenge is finding an experienced aquaculture student / technician / grower to help us grow the business. We are ready to post a job. Any advice to where to post, recruit qualified candidates? I would chime in and say, please send the seaweed growers that posting, but we're just new and getting out there, but we're certainly happy to help drive some candidates your way if we can. But I would also ask Bill and Jennifer, who are in the thick of things from the HR standpoint, if they might have any suggestions around that.
I mean, we've always posted local. I mean, their coastal communities are really full of people with some of the major experience that you need, which is the safety experience, the boating experience, certainly anchoring and different things. We've also had really good results in retaining people through affiliations with the North Island College, Excel College, and VIEA, putting it out there to students who are about to graduate or have work term requirements. Yeah, they're very eager to put what they've learned on paper to practical use and have been very useful. And they've also invested that much time into the industry already, and that they've dedicated their studies to it and are looking for a job. And they build with you from the ground up. And I mean, some of the people that I've had working for me over the years, I've hired them before they were even finished school, and they stayed with us for a long time. But it's really been local. We have never invested in kind of the higher profile job postings. It's always been local newspapers, the social media, certainly, and getting people to share it. There is a lot of transferable skills from commercial fishery and different aspects of aquaculture. And Vancouver Island is a wealth of trained aquaculture people and technicians. And there's a lot of people right now in other forms of aquaculture who are looking very eagerly at kelp, because it's such an exciting new venture that would be liking to make that leap from one industry into this one. So I would keep it local. Right now, Vancouver Island has a wealth of opportunity for young people looking for these types of jobs.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Bill, anything to add to Jennifer's input?
No, that's exactly right. And never dismiss an email that comes your way. If it's very healthy with enthusiasm, that's a really good place to start.
Great. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I'm looking at the chat line, and I don't see if any more questions. So if you've got a last minute question, please submit it. We'd love to get it while we've got these knowledgeable subject matter experts on the call. That would be fantastic. And in the absence of that, I'll keep my eyes on to see if there's any incoming questions. Oh, now we have a couple. Thank you. Oh, this is a great question. I love this question. This is from Gerald. Is there anything that's keeping you guys thinking up at night?
Yes, definitely. The tenure process needs to be improved, and innovation needs to happen in order to make this work effectively. It's not business as usual. COVID hasn't helped, but the system was challenged from a while back. And so we need innovators, both in the regulatory side and the government side and the science side. So I can't stress enough, government has to help in this area, and investment in science. The Norwegians, I look at other jurisdictions, tens of millions of dollars have gone into Norway. They have Seaweed institutes. And by the way, we're looking, and Pat Deacon will be on the line there, we're looking at creating the Canadian Centre for Seaweed Research. We need vehicles for government to invest in the science to make sure that happens. We're behind the curve, and I want to get in front of it, to use a COVID euphemism. And we do that by investing in all aspects to bring the sector along.
Great, thank you. This comes from Mayor Gabby Wickstrom. Thank you, Gabby.
Can I add to that too? I also just want to say,
yes, absolutely.
I was awake all weekend. It's the tenure issue. Just as an example, I've been participating in any time I saw there was a Kelp workshop or a discussion on Kelp at any conference in Canada the past few years. It used to be me and 3 or 4 other people in the room. And last year I went to one and it was standing room only, which told me, holy smokes, people are starting to see the light on Kelp and it's going to get busy soon. We need to get our application. We weren't ready at that point even to make that step, but I was like, we need to get our applications in soon because there's going to be an influx. And unfortunately, industry moves much quicker than government's ability to keep up, which needs to change. But there also needs to be increased innovation funding. So when I worked on the East Coast, there was this federal government agency called ACOA, the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. And I would go to them, you know, we see this technology being used in a different country for cutting fish that gives, you know, you save 2 cents on a pound. How do we access that kind of money to invest in innovation to become more efficient and more profitable on this coast? And I don't see the same opportunities here. And I would really like to see, you know, that investment in science, but also that investment in innovation so that we can get better and more efficient.
Great. A couple of quick questions at the end, so maybe hopefully we can sneak them both in. Again, this comes from Gabby. We're often told we need to transition from old growth logging. How many people might a seaweed tenure employ?
1.5 to 2 people. And we should be thinking in terms of thousands of hectares. So I'm betting 3,000 people direct, and the multiplier can be 2.5 to 3 in aquaculture anyway.
Okay. Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree with that. And also one of the things that intrigued us about kelp aquaculture in the beginning was the fact that we could build it into current fishing activities. So there were off times for our fishermen, and that off time was being then picked up by the activities in the kelp sector. So it's a really good enhancer to, you know, commercial fishing and other activities as well.
I think we've got time for one quick question. This is coming from Pat Deacon in Port Alberni. What are the 3 most important things a coastal community could do for you?
Talk it up, number 1. Join VIEA, number 2, and support the AVICC, who are a strong group in supporting Vancouver Island. Eat well and local so that you remain healthy long enough to support the growth of this industry. Those are 3 things, Pat. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and keep those line of communications open. It's so important to have these relationships with the cities and towns and communities and villages, because really so much of the infrastructure is going to rely, and spin-off opportunities is going to be reliant on the activities that you know, these towns have. And I mean, as Port Alberni as an example, looking at how helpful they have been with this food hub development and ensuring. I look at New Chalmette Economic Development Corporation and their ability to provide business funding to First Nations interested in this type of activity. So it's about keeping those lines of communications open so that they fully understand the projection of this activity and opportunity, so that where there are gaps, they can help fill them.
Great, excellent. Well, we're at 2:31. Just some quick closing remarks. I realized there was just a couple of questions came in there at the end. I would suggest for those folks, if they wouldn't mind, if they could send those again to the Growers Association, which you'll find us at seaweedgrowers.org. And we're happy to either try and take those, field those questions, or we'll certainly redirect you or get you connected to the appropriate folks in the industry. Want to certainly extend our thanks to both Jennifer and Bill, who are absolutely telling the story. I know I'm lucky enough that on a weekly basis, I'm talking to Mike, the CEO at Cascadia, and I always like to end on, I've kind of adopted his mantra from this industry, which is, we're not moving fast enough. So I think that's a great perspective to end on, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I go to bed with that every night and wake up with that every night. But on behalf of VIEA, for my work there and the board and everybody, thank you for participating. I think this has been an excellent session, super informative, and we look forward to seeing you at other events during the rest of the session and summit. Enjoy the summit.
Ready for your interest.
Thanks.
Thank you.